Hi, welcome to Restrocast. Today with me is Justin Skelton. He's the Senior VP and CIO at Dine Brands. Justin's journey is not only a long but an extremely fulfilling and enriching one. I think Justin is somebody who achieved peak in each part of his career. I actually looked at 3 peaks while talking to him, right from Allstate Insurance to Bank of America to CVS and now to Dine Brands. Justin worked, contributed to 4 different industries and contributed in each of them at the top. This conversation was really enriching for me. I'm sure you'll enjoy it too. Welcome to Restrocast. Justin, welcome to Restrocast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for allowing us to do that.
Sure.
Justin, can you tell us what is your day job today? What is your role today? And then we will dive into, the
Sure.
personal side of life where it all started.
Sure. So my role today is Senior Vice President and CIO at Dine Brands Global, and I run all of IT, all things IT. That's a combination of restaurant technology, so any technologies that occur inside the restaurant. I've got a good amount of that accountability, and I say a good amount because there are actually systems. For example, some of the back-end HR systems in the restaurants that we don't directly decide upon, although we obviously look at where there's an opportunity to leverage our scale to get the best prices. But in terms of the back of house and the in-restaurant front of house technology, I've got accountability for that. In addition, the off-prem technology we use, the website, mobile app, all the business intelligence capabilities, I have teams that drive that as well. And then finally, I would say the corporate systems, anything that takes place that supports our corporate employees, our Dine employees. I've got, that also falls within my purview. And also any infrastructure, right? Cloud-based technologies, et cetera, also fall within my remit as well. So yeah, that's my day to day. And then in addition to that, I also sit on the executive team. So I report into the CEO. And so any discussions around kind of corporate strategy, direction of the company, I participate directly in those conversations.
And how large, give like a 30 seconds on how large is Dine Brands?
So Dine Brands from an employee-based perspective, we're at about 500 to 600 people, right? Give or take. But the difference with our company, because that may seem kind of small, but when you think about it, we support all the franchisees as well. Now, because we're what we call asset light, we're 100% franchise now. We don't have employees that sit inside of the restaurants, right? The franchisees are accountable for those resources. So it's one of those things where the numbers look relatively small, but the impact, from an IT perspective, is broad, is huge, because it not only it deals with all the technology in the field as well.
And how many restaurants?
So we've got about 1,600 in IHOP, roughly the same amount in Applebee, so another 1,600. And then for Fuzzies, we're anywhere between, I think we got close to 200 locations is where we're at for Fuzzies right now, and growing.
So that's like 3,400.
Oh yeah. So you're talking up close to 4,000 restaurants. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's 3,200. Then you got another 200. So not that far shy of, I think, 4,000. We'll just call it 4,000. Sounds better.
Perfect. Justin, so, we'll dive into the personal side of the story.
Okay.
Where it all started. Where did you grow up? How was the early life?
Sure. It's an interesting story for a lot of different reasons. I always find it hard. To me, it's a little bit boring because I don't like talking about myself a whole lot. But where it started, I think it's, you have to express that I'm a military brat. We call them military brats, and that's where your father, mother was a service member and was a career service member. So we grew up moving around. So I grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts. We moved around. I think I counted. I think just even being part of the military, I think we lived in 5 different states. Lived overseas. Lived in Germany for 3 years. We were there, and so basically, I would describe my childhood as being one of continuing to move around, like nearly almost every 3 years. You're in my case, my father would come home and say, we're off moving to the next place, and so it was a bit of an adventure, not knowing where you were going to end up. And so that's how I would characterize my upbringing. I've got siblings, so not only was it just me and not an only child, but we would actually, so all of us would go through that same experience of having to pick up, move to a new place, meet new friends, right? Get adjusted to the new environment and adapt to whatever was going on wherever you were going. And so, yeah, that was
how many siblings?
I'm sorry.
How many siblings?
So I've got 3 brothers and 1 sister. Yeah, and I'm the second youngest, so in the pecking order.
And how did that shape you? Moving around and almost, you said every 3 years.
Yeah, like
so,
roughly
right?
every 3 years. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have to learn how to adapt, right? I think you're always subject to changing environment because you could live in the same state and never have moved and have to deal with change just because you're going from an adolescent to into a teenage years into high school years. But when you have to move around, you don't have the luxury of having friends that go back to elementary school whom you've gone all the way through your adolescent phase and graduating high school with. So the way I would characterize it would be really having to adapt to change, because that change was being thrown at you. I mean, to give you a perfect example of it, when we moved from Tucson, Arizona to Wiesbaden, Germany. And if you could imagine, if you think about a cultural change going from in the desert, right?
Yeah.
The Great Southwest, and moving to a whole different country and moving to Germany, you can understand how you have to adapt that, right?
Yeah, it's not only culture, it's weather, it's
the whole
food,
thing,
everything. Yeah.
The whole thing. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's the weather was different. The language was very different. I mean, we lived in an American community, so you had other Americans around you that spoke English. So it wasn't like you were being thrown into an environment where you didn't speak the language. I mean, where people around you didn't speak the language. But certainly when you left the confines of the military installation and you went out into we call it the German economy at the time. Oh, you had to learn how to get around, right? And so it was a completely new experience, but it's one where you had to really adapt to change. In addition to that, in the military, you're exposed to a lot of different people, right? Different people of different backgrounds, I mean, if you could live in the U.S. and, as they say, a lot of people never live outside of 5 miles from where they grew up, right? So, but when you're in the military, you've got people from different parts of the U.S., different parts of different countries even. And so that was the other thing I think that changed me as well, or at least influenced the person I am today.
Change you how? Like on a day-to-day basis or in life, where all do you feel that change? Or where do you feel that, okay, I'm different from probably, people, my peers, how they react to situations versus you react?
Yeah, I can't speak for them because I don't know.
For your own right. I mean,
yeah.
where do you see your reactions different?
Yeah, I mean, how I feel about my background and how it relates to how I interact just in my personal life and business, what have you, is one of a great deal of tolerance, I think, just because I've again experienced different things growing up and different cultures, different, you name it, right? And so my level of interaction is one of tolerance, listening, teamwork. I also come from a sports background, and partly in the military. Military is one component of it, but also playing sports growing up. I mean, so a lot of it was just around team play, and you win as a team, you operate as a team. You can't win a team as an individual. So I think those things, the way I would characterize, would be the things that actually influence how I interact today, right? And how it translates to business, right, throughout my career, as a matter of fact. So I like to think that those things had a very positive impact. Again, just in terms of how I've operated, whether it's at Allstate Insurance Company when I worked, CVS, Bank of America now, I potentially believe that those things translate really well.
So how was the early career? Where did you go to college, and how did the first job happen?
Yeah, so I went to my undergraduate. I went to Cal State University of San Bernardino, small state school in California. I got my MBA from University of Illinois Chicago, but when I started after I graduated, quite frankly, I was looking for a job. That was it. I needed to earn some money. I needed to eat, and so when I left college, just looking around for different opportunities, and then looked through the want ads back in the day, right? You just little want ad sections and different things, and saw an opportunity to become a unit supervisor at Allstate Insurance Company. I was living in California at the time, and that's how I kicked off my career.
And that was a long one in the insurance and eventually in banking.
Yeah. So again, I didn't, a lot of people may think that, hey, when you thought about insurance, were you looking at going into insurance? And I was like, no. I mean, any industry could have approached me at that point in time when I needed to pay my bills, and I certainly would have been open to any opportunity, any industry. But I also knew when I joined in the insurance business, the company had name recognition with me. Everybody knew who Allstate was, right? So to me, there was some comfort in knowing I'd be joining a company that wasn't just a small company that I didn't really understand and didn't have any background with. So yeah, that's how I started, and it started with Allstate, and then after Allstate, I was there for 19 years. So I started here in California, was here for a good chunk of my career. Just like any other, business, there's always some change going on. And as we talked about, right, change growing up, you started to adapt to change. The function I was in actually was being consolidated. So we had offices being consolidated. And so the question was, well, what am I going to do next? So what's the next opportunity for me? So I was newly married and wanted to start a family. A good deal of my family actually live in Arizona. My parents at that time had moved from California to Arizona. My dad was planning to retire, and they wanted to live there. And so being newlyweds, right, and wanting to start a family at some point in time, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to be closer to family. So I took an opportunity to move to Phoenix. And even though I started my career in IT, when I moved to Phoenix, they didn't have an IT role because it was more of a regional or a small office environment.
And
so
also,
I went at Allstate, yeah. So I went into underwriting, actually.
Oh.
And it was an interesting, I know. And that's what I thought too. I was thinking, well, the only opportunities there is in underwriting. So I was an underwriter for about 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And great experience. I mean, I always say if you're in the insurance business, the three best departments you could work in to really understand what's going on, obviously, is sales, claims, and underwriting. And when I was in underwriting, I learned a lot about, just because I interacted directly with the Allstate agents, I learned a lot about just how you manage risk, right? How you think about, when you're assessing whether a customer is a potential customer is a good sort of prospect, a prospect that turns into an insured, you've really got to apply some critical thinking. It's not just, for example, they could have another policy or two or three other policies and have a long-term relationship with you, although the policy they're bringing to you on its surface may not be the best risk. So being able to look at risk holistically and bringing that to the table. So I was there. They figured out pretty quickly I'm an IT guy. So within that building, they were really, at that time, we were really building a department around technology. And so I was thrilled when at that time the president of the region I was in, the regional vice president, came to me, and it was kind of more of a passing thing where he said, "Oh, by the way, you're going to be moving to a different department." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I didn't necessarily have insights into what I'd be doing, but I think it was widely known that this guy knows technology. We're building technology. He really needs to be over there if he's going to be the biggest benefit to us. So I worked over there, did a range of different responsibilities, but the headquarters of Allstate was in Northbrook, Illinois. So mostly if you wanted to advance your career, you're going to have to relocate. So when I was working in Arizona in this newly formed department, my title was Technology Division Manager. There were multiple technology division managers around the country. So each regional office had one of me in their offices. So I get a call, right? Hey, are you interested in coming to Chicago, coming to the big house, right? And coming in doing much broader things that impact not just the region you're in, but across the entire company. To which I said, I couldn't pass that up. At that point in time, I was really interested in growing my career. So moved to Chicago metro area, and worked in a variety of different responsibilities there. Finished up graduate school and was really, really happy with my career progression. I felt really good about how things were progressing. I felt, but there was a point at which I was deciding, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay here and get the quote unquote gold watch? Or am I going to start really thinking about my next moves outside the company? Just giving it some thought, right? I saw where there was sort of a trend where a lot of people were moving to different companies. It used to be back in the day, you stayed with the company, right? And you retired with that same company. And I saw where there was a trend was emerging because we were bringing people from the outside into our company where versus just everything being kind of an internal promotion. So, these kind of things start to have an impact. You start to think, perhaps my best days are really going out and exploring what's in the marketplace. Before I could do anything, I just finished up my MBA. I get a call from somebody I used to work with, who was worked at the Auto Club group, which is AAA. And the person said, "Hey, remember me? I'm looking for a chief technology officer, a CTO." And I said, "Oh, okay." And things moved pretty quickly. And the next thing I know, I'm joining AAA as their chief technology officer out of Dearborn, Michigan. So I was in Michigan, and a great company, much smaller than Allstate Insurance Company. So it's sort of before I was as they say, a small fish in a big pond. Now I became a sort of a big fish in a small pond. But it was a great experience for me. I was really, really looking forward to really having that broader impact as an executive at that point. Making the technology decisions is really what I was interested in doing.
What year was that?
That would have been 2006. 2006, 2005, 2006. And I was there, and I was really happy with the job and with the role with the company. But I had some aging parents on the West Coast, and I found myself, my father was sick at the time, and I found myself traveling back and forth on a regular basis. And I just said, well, I don't think I can't really sustain this. And so I had an interest in coming back to the West Coast or to Arizona, to either Arizona or California. There was an opportunity that came up. And by the way, my background there was strictly insurance. Okay. I hadn't had any restaurant experience or anything else. I mean, my whole sole career was in the insurance business. And even at AAA, AAA does towing, but they're effectively the biggest, the largest part of their revenue comes from selling insurance. So, there was an opportunity working for Countrywide. So most people, some people forget about Countrywide, but actually Countrywide's a big mortgage company in the U.S. And it was right around just before the global financial crisis, the GFC. I got a call that Countrywide was looking for a CIO to run their insurance services group. And so I knew there, interestingly enough, I mean, it is a small world. The insurance business can be a relatively small world. What I didn't know,
it's a pretty defined vertical,
very defined vertical. So you find that a lot of people you've probably crossed paths with at some point in time, or you know them, or people that know them. So interviewed with them. They're based in Southern California, based in Irvine, California at the time. And interviewed and joined with Countrywide Insurance Services Group, which was a phenomenal experience, right? But all good, nothing good lasts. So it was an interesting thing. Bank of America at the time had, even before I joined, they had acquired. They were in the process of acquiring Countrywide. So even during the interview process, not only did I have to interview with people at Countrywide, I also had to interview with people from Bank of America.
The acquisition was
underway. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it was moving pretty quickly as I was going through the interviewing process. So the minute I thought, okay, this is great, the interview's done, hey, time out, you got to interview with a whole lot of other people, So it was a fairly lengthy process of interviewing with Countrywide / Bank of America at the time. So I joined up to Countrywide and Bank of America, and ran all the combined insurance services group for Bank of America. So at the time there was property and casualty, and not to give a lesson around insurance, but there were multiple divisions that were part of the combination of Countrywide and Bank of America. And so I was there. I ran that function. I reported into a kind of a dual reporting relationship to the overall CIO of all the consumer bank, which included insurance, and had a dotted line to the CEO of the insurance services group right there. So I was there, but again, a lot of change happening. At the time, Bank of America wasn't really interested in continuing with the property casualty business. Insurance vertical is a very specific, you need a very specific skill set. It's a very unique business. You have claims in the banking industry. You don't have much in the way of volatility around revenue and claims. You just don't, right? But insurance, you do. You have something called catastrophes, right? You've got a lot more risk you have to manage. And at the time, most banks were trying to, had a capital preservation requirement or a capital reservation need to have, right? To be able to demonstrate to the federal government that even though that you weren't too big to fail, right? You had to,
especially after the crash.
After the crash, yeah, it was like everybody was saying, non-strategic assets were being sold off. So if it wasn't core to your business model, those assets needed to, so you could basically bring in the money to actually have the right capital reserves. So the insurance services group was one on the chopping block, or one to be sold, as better put. And so I had a decision to make. Was I going to stay with the insurance component, or was it important for me to stay with the Bank of America? because that decision was going to be critical. If I stayed with insurance, if it was sold off, then I was going to go with the company that it was being divested to as part of the divestiture. If I stayed with Bank of America, then it would be I become now officially I'm officially now in the banking industry.
Yeah.
So that was sort of an inflection point for me. And at the time, my kids were still middle school, elementary school. So the first time in my career, I basically said, I'm not willing to move. I've got to get my kids through, give them some stability in this whole process. So I made a decision to stay with Bank of America. I became the chief technology officer for the mortgage and the insurance and what was remaining from the insurance business. So I partnered with the CIO of that same organization, but I ran all the infrastructure, all the architecture and all that. So I did that for a while. And then of course, a lot of changes, then you're off thinking about your next move. Typically either you're thinking about the next move or the company's thinking about where they can put you, right, where they have a need for you. So after that, I went into data management. So I really was interested in learning more about data. So even though it's part of a CIO function or a CTO function, you're going to get exposed to data. But when you get to, when you want to do it sort of in that particular vertical in that domain across the company, you're going to get a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I went into the data management under enterprise technology and functioned there for a while.
In Bank of America.
At Bank of America, yeah. And so company was changing. I was one of the last remaining offices in California. Could not relocate. Was not in a place where I could make that move. And so ultimately, I made a decision to figure out what my next job was going to be. One of the individuals that I worked with at the insurance services group that I mentioned, part of that Countrywide insurance group, he was the chief operating officer there. He had gone to work for another company that was based in the U.S., but they had acquired a specialty insurance group out of London, and so he calls me up and says, "Hey, I could use your help. We're bringing these two companies together. You've proven that you've got a great background. He and I worked really well together." He says, "I want you to consult with me for about 9 months." And I said, "Great." And I said, "What am I going to do?" He says, "You're going to do, I got a ton of things for you to do. And when those things are completed, I also need you to do some research, right, around things like, autonomous vehicles and some of the things that would be more innovative." So I was really excited about that. It was probably in my career, I have to say that was one of the most fun opportunities I had, because I had never been on a 1099. I had never been an independent contractor. I didn't even know what that was. I'd always been sort of a corporate employee. So that was a great experience. Plus I could just throw these different ideas out. They came to me, asked me what my thoughts were, perspectives were, and it was just a great arrangement.
Got a chance to think freely about technology.
Exactly. Hey, give me your thoughts around this, right? And you didn't have necessarily a team where you had all the administrative duties you've got, where you had team meetings, running team meetings, etc. So it was me just working as an independent contractor, and again, having the freedom to be able to offer perspectives, put together presentations, the whole bit, was really, when I look back on it, not to mention I was living in London for 9 months, and that was an experience in and of itself. So I worked with him for 9 months. My contract was coming to an end. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. So my next assignment was working for CVS Health. Never worked in retail, never worked in the healthcare business, right?
Yeah, these are two beasts combined.
These are two beasts, exactly. So I joined up with CVS, was based in Scottsdale, Arizona. It happened to be a location that I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
At that time, my kids were sort of off doing their own thing, right? Off to college and all that. So I had the flexibility and freedom to start to broaden out a bit. I mentioned to you I got family in Arizona, so to me it was a perfect fit. So yeah, went to work for CVS Health, was there. Huge company. You know, I tell people about when you think about acquisitions. I always tell people when you work for a company that size. I mean, I think we were before the acquisition of Aetna. I think we were probably about Fortune 10, Fortune 11. I mean, it was massive. Yeah, massive company. And then
I didn't know that.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know that. I never realized that.
Oh yeah, and it's predominantly all domestic United States. 11,000 CVS stores. Yeah, I mean now it's like Fortune 3 or 4 with the acquisition of Aetna. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a big company. I think revenue is about 300 billion, give or take. It's just insanely large. But I had an opportunity to work there. I was an executive there. We did a lot of transformations at the company. So did my time there, and very similar or a similar experience where you're thinking about, okay, are you going to have to relocate? Because after the acquisition of Aetna, a lot of those individuals were actually on the East Coast, and CVS is based in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. So, so you're really starting to figure out what do you want to do next in your career. Long story short, I left CVS, and I was thinking about my next opportunity, and that's when Dine Brands comes into play. And so,
how did that happen?
The way that happened, quite frankly, is I had left CVS, and I was looking to say, okay, what do I want to do differently, right? What do I want to do? And just like anything else, you're sort of looking around and seeing, who what companies are doing what. A recruiter got in touch with a recruiter over there, and started the interviewing process. At that time in my career, what I would say would be, I felt like I had done everything just about I'd wanted to do. I'd already had the CIO title, which of course for me, from my humble beginnings, I was delighted that I reached the level of CIO and reached the level of CTO. I was really happy with that.
And that too with like the largest companies in their sector.
Exactly. I mean, divisional CTO, even though it's a divisional CTO, divisional CIO, these are large companies, and even those groups are fairly large. So for me, just to be able to achieve that level, I was delighted. I mean, so for me, it wasn't about, I want to go to become a CIO again. At that point in time in my career, I was really looking forward to how can I help companies? If my interest there was just saying, let me take my experience and, it could have been quite frankly a project manager, and I was prepared to say, let me just help the company out. I felt like I'd already, like I said before, I felt like I'd accomplished my main goals that I'd set out, and I was delighted. So I joined the company. I was running the cloud-based technologies for Dine at the time. I relocated to the headquarters is in Glendale, California. And I was happy to relocate. Again, my kids were already off doing their own thing. I had the flexibility to move. It happened to be in my geography that I had a preference in being in. And so a lot of friends, my two of my kids are in California, so it was to me ideal.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit. Which was just like most people.
You joined in 2019.
Yeah, so I joined before the pandemic. I joined in 2019, but the pandemic was like in 2020. It was like 2019, 2020. So all of a sudden, the whole thing changed on a dime. Right? We went from I went from okay, I'm sort of getting an understanding around how the restaurant business works and how in Dine Brands to oh my God. Restaurants are closing down, right? There's no in-restaurant dining. What is it going to mean? Now, in the course of all of that, my predecessor had moved on to a different company, and I get a call from then the CFO saying, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "I think I'm doing okay, you know." But this is when everything was getting really crazy with the pandemic, and he says basically, "Hey, we want you to come in and be the CIO." And he said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "I'm in." Because what I decided at that point in time was it was either I was going to take the CIO job or somebody else was going to come in outside and take the CIO job. Now, because I already had the experience, I felt like, hey, listen, I'll go ahead and take the job because at that point in time, I felt like I can make the biggest impact for the company. So I took the job, but during that period of time, it was a challenge because, we needed to make very difficult conversation or very difficult decisions around how we were going to fund the IT portfolio, right? It was going to be significantly reduced.
So you're talking about, I think I missed that. You're talking about taking the CIO job at Dine.
At Dine, yes, yeah. Dine Brands, yeah. So it was during the pandemic, right? So
you took that up during the pandemic.
Oh yeah, so the pandemic. So I joined the company in 2019.
Yeah.
Right. And then what happened is the pandemic began to really.
The role was different.
Yeah, the role was different. I was in a different role at the time. Fair. So I was running all the cloud technologies, all the infrastructure when I first joined Dine, and I reported into the CIO. And when the pandemic hit, the then CIO took a different job. And then I was elevated to take the role I currently have today. But during that period of time, we had to make some decisions around personnel decisions, because overall it was a very difficult situation for all businesses, but certainly the restaurant business was impacted. Hospitality was impacted more greatly. And so at that time, we had decided that, listen, we're going to have to potentially reduce our staff. We're going to reduce the overall IT portfolio. And so that was a very difficult period of time, kind of being new in the role. A lot of people like taking the role when everything is good, right? You got a big portfolio, you got a lot of money to spend. But this was a situation when I took over. It was it was during a very difficult time. Again, across all industries, everybody was. But
even more so for the restaurants, because the visibility was also poor for the restaurants, especially the dine-in formats, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, world could not believe that dine-in is going to come back in the same form.
Exactly. And our big pivot was we needed to really, to survive, and we had to really go off-prem. We had to really look at the digital. Where we were from a digital perspective, but really what it did was it accelerated a lot of work we had contemplated. We needed to accelerate that because that's how a lot of people wanted to engage. I mean, that was, for example, pay and go, right? Bring your own device, pay on your own device. These were things that, being able to see the menu on, pulling up your phone and pulling it off a QR code.
As a restaurant, I mean, I run a restaurant tech company, and I can tell you that so many solutions over the years, which we were kind of ignoring.
Right.
Even the restaurants, when they were asking for it, we were like, all right, are you going to deploy it across the board? And like, no, we're just trying digital menu. We were like, guys, we're not here for experimentation.
Right.
We tried from somebody else. Let us know. And as soon as pandemic hit, the next 2 months, all those solutions were like we were not only supposed to release, they got deployed.
Exactly right. And we went through the same thing. And so that was our experience. And so it was one of restaurants were being impacted here. Consumers and guests have a different way to engage you. A lot of them they were going to do it through DSPs, through DoorDash, Uber Eats, etc. And so we needed to make sure we adapted our strategy to support that, to support where the customers were going to be. So, that was a very challenging time. We had a new CEO then that came in, and before he came in, I was reporting to the CFO. When he came in, it was starting to come out of the pandemic, but a recognition from him as well as from me, having had just some time in the role, that we were really behind in our technology stack. We were really.
I need to ask you that. And before you share exactly what was your conversation with him, I need to ask you from your perspective, coming from insurance, banking, retail, healthcare, right? How shocked were you when you saw how behind restaurant industry is on tech?
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't entirely shocked because, you would think that the bigger the company, the higher the investment in technology and the more forward-looking technology is. But in fact, I wasn't entirely surprised because it would be more surprising that companies with bigger names are as far behind as they were. Is the way I would characterize it.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Fair.
so I think we tend to think that Fortune 10 companies have all the best technology out there, but that's not always the case. Particularly in the retail segment, because the margins are different. Retail has different margins, and when you think about how you invest in technology, that has an impact. However, if you look at like banking technology, particularly around just the wealth side of the business, your technology has to be state of the art. If you miss trades, it costs billions, right? On the CVS side of it, as it relates to the pharmacy component of it, or the pharmacy side of the business, it also has to be state of the art. But it doesn't mean that all the other technology is as current or as up to date as you would think. So when I came into the restaurant business, so when I came into the restaurant business, I wasn't entirely shocked by it. But as an IT person, you also look at that as a challenge, as a positive challenge.
Yeah, the opportunity is
significant,
brilliant. Yeah,
because if you come into, a lot of technology people, if you already go into an organization that's already got all the current technology, what's left to do? You're just on maintenance, right? There's the excitement lies with organizations who are behind in technology, but are willing to spend the money to get to a level of currency in terms of the technology stack. So for me, so I looked at it as a great opportunity. I just needed to have a partner who agreed that capital investment in technology was a good thing, and it worked out really well.
So you're talking about your conversation with the CEO.
Yeah, we had a few. He joined the company, and we had a few, sort of introductory one-on-ones, and talked about just different perspectives and points of views around it. And he had two critical points of views that I aligned, or three that I aligned 100% with. One was, we need to invest more into technology. Okay. Wow. And to me, it was like, okay, this is great. We had already developed there was already a 3 to 4 year roadmap. But having it on paper is one thing. Knowing that you've got an investment or investments are going to be made to be able to bring that to life is a whole different thing. The other thing, another decision that was made was having me report directly to him. And that really spoke to the fact that we see IT as a strategic partner. We see how critical, technology is going forward and to the success of our business. So therefore, it made sense for me to be part of those discussions. So anytime you talk strategy, you can't talk business strategy, without a technology component, right? And so, so to me, that was a big win. And the other thing I think that took a lot of pressure off of us was that technology should be brand led. And I think when, as technologists, it puts a lot of pressure on your teams where you've got to come in with all the answers using technology. And at the end of the day, in order to get any technology implemented, you need to have sponsorship. You need to have business sponsors who are aligned to your strategy. If those ideas around the point of technology are misaligned at any level, the initiative gets stalled. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and particularly when you're dealing with restaurant technology, because in our case, we're asset light, as I mentioned, we are 100% franchised. There's a lot of buy-in and support and sponsorship and just getting everybody on the same page to take something like a point of sale and be able to take it all the way through the system and actually start deploying it. It's a massive undertaking. Very different from when you have when all of the in the case of, for example, CVS, all those stores are owned by those are corporate stores. So if there's a need for technology, the level of buy-in you need is much limited. Is limited by the fact that you're not dealing with individual business owners who have to make sort of financial decisions, right? How much cash they have, how they want to invest their dollars, et cetera, et cetera. That's more of a broad-based sort of enterprise project that's done at the corporate level.
But working with franchises altogether, like you're dealing with so many different other business owners who are gonna question every dollar that is gonna go in.
That's exactly right. And so, so anyway, that's sort of the journey as to getting us to the point where we are now.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating, I think, and your perspective on why you were not shocked looking at the restaurant tech.
Right.
It's very interesting for me because I generally look at it as that retail had such high stakes and such low margins and high cost of capital and square footage and so on, that retail was much more tech mature much early.
Right.
Restaurants kind of remained very
behind.
Callous in their approach, I would say, because high margins, cash business,
sure,
low cost of capital involved, at least once you made the restaurant, rest of it can run on credit.
Yes.
So the margin profile changed significantly over the last couple of years.
Exactly.
Right. And that has actually also forced restaurants to think of tech as an efficiency, partner and not really just a utility.
Exactly. I mean, and that's how we had to approach it too. It's not enough to just bring in technology that's going to cost them more. If they can't see the ROI and the returns in that, then it's problematic. You're just going to be difficult. And I think that can contribute to why certain industries are a little bit far behind, because of the amount of effort it takes to be able to get the adoption of the technology and sell individual business owners on how this actually is going to make their worlds a lot better, right? Improve guest experience, improve efficiency of their server and restaurant staff members. So I wasn't shocked. The good news is we were using technology. We had points of sale in all of our restaurants. So it wasn't like we didn't have some level of technology that was.
I of course I didn't mean that. I just meant like how probably at a cloud infrastructure level, how synchronized the world is today, how the seamlessness that is expected and required across products.
Yes.
Is very new to this world.
Exactly. Well, even to your extent, even like data management, understanding your customer, right?
Yeah.
Your customer preferences and everything else. I mean, you've got other industries that have been doing this a lot longer, right? Around loyalty programs and whatnot. When you think about the airline industry, they know loyalty exceptionally well.
Okay.
When you think about the hotel industry, they know loyalty really well. And so, we just deployed a loyalty program. A lot of that is a function of also having people that worked in different industries that joined our company, who understand how to deploy a loyalty program. So absolutely.
Justin, this is what a journey. Fascinating, at so many levels, and especially, the piece where I think you started reinventing when you reached the top, like one peak, second peak, and probably, this is kind of, should I count it as a third peak? You're.
I think so. I think you count this as a third peak for sure, because I think that's a way to characterize it. It was an unexpected third peak, and it wasn't one that I was hoping for. It was literally I felt like I've done everything in my career that I wanted to do. I always felt there was probably more I could do. So I would definitely say this was sort of another. I like the way you said it's another peak in the story. So
in in restaurant tech, the entire industry is quite new. I still feel that restaurant tech is in its infancy, and then especially last couple of years, I think a lot of trends that COVID accelerated were there.
Right.
Like, I mean, a lot of things were brewing up,
right.
Post, I think, 2015, 16, until 19, and COVID just accelerated so many of them. There's so much new tech, I'm sure, must be getting thrown at you, or must be coming your way.
Right.
As a CIO, how do you evaluate that tech today? Like, how do you look at that today? When you look at a partner, is it about features? Is it about the shiny new stuff? Is it about the robustness, credibility? What is that priority order, and what do you wish that new age restaurant tech companies should know?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think the way we evaluate technology is there's so much technology out there. There is so many different vendors out there, and it's a crowded field of different providers out there. I only know because my inbox is pretty full of different things that I get, where we've got this technology that does this, that. For us, it starts with, what's the business need? Do we, because we have limited capital, we've got limited time, right, to evaluate everything. So we're going to have to make in place bets on certain technologies that are really going to enable the business, right? But part of you got to understand, before you can do that, you got to understand what the problem you're trying to solve is. So we're going through this thing right now where we're doing time and motion studies within the restaurant, because we've always toyed with different technologies. We had a robot running around in the building. We did before, like we did, and it was just really we want to exercise the innovation muscle, right? We want to still keep a pulse on how this stuff works. And they're interested too, right? They're interested. Hey, we're gonna loan you a robot, and we'll show you how it works. And so we should always keep the door open to that, right? So I'm always in favor of, as these different firms have come up with technologies that they think is value add, and looking at those technologies. But again, you have to be smart about how much time you allocate to those conversations, because the other business of IT has to continue to move forward. So what we do is we want to understand what problem there is to solve. So, for example, there's an interest in deep fry stations, right? Because we know that there are a lot of competitive routine tasks that get performed that we believe may have a benefit there. So we believe that that's an area, the back of the house is where there's a big opportunity for us. We're familiar with front of the house. When we've deployed for IHOP, for example, we've converted 1,015 stores to the new point of sale. We've got 6,200 tablets we've deployed out there within these stores. So and they have payment swiping capability, not 100%, but a good percentage of them. They can actually take the payment right there. And we know that those things are going to help with table turns, order accuracy, and those things that are critically important. But we want to see where we go next. So the way we evaluate technology is not just that we're evaluating the technology that's in front of us, but more about what problem we're trying to solve. So as we understand where those pain points are, that's how we'll think about the technology. We are also looking at, for example, our general managers. The general managers are the core of running a restaurant. Yeah. We just had them. We had 3 general managers meet with the executive team a couple of months back, and we want to hear directly from them around some of the challenges that they're facing. But that's how we think about it. That's how we think about technology, and then we have to work with the business to figure out, okay, every business has budgetary constraints. Where do we want to make those investments, right? And so we have to prioritize those things. Some things fall above the line, some things will fall below the line. It doesn't mean we won't do them, but perhaps that's a 2 or 3 year time frame.
How do you reset that budget? I mean, but my assumption and understanding is that with the franchising business, and given that you're 100% franchised, there is a budget allocation.
Right.
Sometimes with percentages and most of the times with dollar value,
right?
Given to the franchisee,
right?
And getting another dollar out of their pocket is,
right,
if not impossible, must be equally tough.
Yeah.
How do you reset that budget, or do you even reset that budget, given the new kind of technologies are just flowing in, and probably the percentage of investment a restaurant makes in tech needs to change and increase?
Yeah. So for us, we work closely with our brand partners. So Applebee's, IHOP, and Fuzzy's Tacos. And every year we go through a process of budgetary planning. We sit down with them and we want to get a feel for, by the way, before it even goes there, we have a strategic roadmap. We have a roadmap that we built that says, these are the areas we need to invest in technology. These are the business processes, right? These are, and we've laid that out. And so basically what we're saying is that we're starting to fill in the blanks. These are technologies that we were missing, right? These are gaps we want to fill. So we have a roadmap that we've laid out. And then every year, we have to sit down with them and figure out, okay, we know what the roadmap looks like. What are the things you want to invest in from a brand perspective? Now, those things bleed over into the franchisees, right? So if we go with a new point of sale, we have to budget what are the things and how we're going to contribute funding and investments in support of the franchisees. And then, of course, as we get closer, we need to start having conversations with the franchisees as well in terms of how they need to start preparing for that technology. So it really is more of it's a collaborative approach and of course, everything is governed by how much budget you have, right? There's not an unlimited amount of money that you have to spend. So that's where we got to place bets on what we're going to invest in any given year, based on based on how we've defined the roadmap. Now, with the pandemic, of course, that blew everything out of the water. So we had planned to do these things. And of course, it's like, well, you can't do those things now. You need to redeploy capital to do the off-prem, right? The digital, the mobile app, and all the things that we needed to do that pivot on. But that's how we go through it. We have a roadmap. We have annual planning that we go through. We have budgetary constraints. There's a lot of communication that has to happen, as you know, when you're contemplating technology, if it's going to impact the franchisees. You need to be having those conversations like a year or two in advance, right? And so there's a lot of so it may not be, for example, when we start looking at a point of sale, it may not be that you're going to you're going to roll out that point of sale in the next year. We have proof of concepts we do, right? We have pilots that we run, and that gives us an opportunity to really understand what the financial and what the capital impacts are going to be in the year in which you're going to do a full rollout.
And right? That's why enterprise sales are painful.
Exactly.
How many entrepreneurs, including me, take time to understand that, all right, this is going to be a 3-year process.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when things are going great.
Exactly.
When everything is just lining up for you, it may take 1.5 to 3 years, for it to happen.
Right. And that's if all the stars align. And in many cases, when you're rolling out something that big, the stars don't always align the way you'd like them to, right? Any hiccup, any delay, any problem incurred when you're rolling out a technology of that magnitude can stall the plan. And we've had that too. We've had to reset. But
what's your view on the new age young companies versus legacy systems who are trying to innovate on cloud?
Right.
Because I continuously see this this very interesting thing that, like, some of the large legacy players who have really done a great job back in the day,
right?
When they have a cloud strategy, right, even their cloud strategy is so legacy.
Yeah.
The thinking of cloud is so yesteryears that I'm like, oh wow, like you didn't get it, you didn't understand it fully. But then at the same time, I also appreciate, I've come to appreciate in the last few years, the security, compliance,
Sure.
those pieces, the credibility of the system, those kind of pieces. So I also see the point.
Yeah.
But that does not really absolve them from using the cloud wrong.
That's
So
exactly
it's
right.
kind of the dichotomy sits.
Yeah.
What's your how you experience it?
Yeah. It's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing, and I'll say why. Because these young companies are coming in. They're starting with a clean slate. They're coming in. Almost like you could use the Teslas of the world, right? That they can disrupt. They can come in highly disruptive.
Yeah, they don't have baggage.
They don't have baggage, right? They don't have legacy thinking behind it. So they can start with a clean slate and say, if we want to think about how we're going to do this, we're going to do it this way, without the bureaucracy and the oversight. So these younger companies, if done right, they have an opportunity to be highly disruptive. Because they can think that way, and so when you think about like a cloud strategy, they're not faking a cloud strategy. It's not like we're putting it is truly a cloud strategy, and so that's one of the things I think that younger companies bring that mindset to it. Now the bigger companies, as you pointed out, they have that stability. They've had the maturity of process, and those things also add significant value. The younger companies don't always have that, so so they can move quick. The smaller companies, younger companies can move quick, and they can do that. But that also has this risk associated with that too. So you're right. There's always that you're striking that right balance between the young innovative company who's bringing a lot of fresh new ideas to the table, and the stability of a legacy company that has benefit as well.
So are you taking a lot of bets on the new ones?
I'm sorry?
Are you taking a lot of bets on the new ones?
Yeah, we're taking some bets. We again, for us, it goes back to what problem are we trying to solve?
Sure.
Requirements and what the individual needs are for our company. If we feel like these younger companies, smaller companies, working in conjunction with our team, can scale to support a large enterprise, then now it's a hill to climb. But we feel like, hey, if this is our longer term benefit, then we'll place those bets. Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Justin, this was a great conversation. I loved your story. I loved, I mean, there's so many things that to reflect on. I'm sure whoever is going to listen to you is going to be inspired.
Good.
And thanks for your candid conversation on the world of restaurant, tech as well.
It's good to be here, and I appreciate the time. Really excited to be here and share my story, but also, how the restaurant business has made an impact to me. Right? It is that third peak, as you say, and but thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Thank you.